Imagine awakening to a world where the very air you breathe is steeped in mystery and dread, where the morning light barely pierces the gloom of an era cloaked in shadows. Tonight, we embark on a poignant journey through one of history's most harrowing chapters, the Black Death. As you settle in, perhaps, with a soft hum of a fan in the background, let's delve into this transformative period, a time that reshaped humanity in ways unimaginable. You find yourself in Europe, the year 1347. The dawn breaks not with the usual warmth, but with a chill that speaks of impending doom. Your eyes flutter open, and you stretch on a straw-filled mattress, not in the solitude of a private room, but in the communal space of a one-room cottage surrounded by your family. The walls, a patchwork of wood, mud, clay, and straw, whisper tales of resilience against the cold, though the thatched roof above often weeps when the rains are heavy. The aroma of last night's hearth fire still lingers, mingling with the earthy scent of the dirt floor and the sharp, unwashed musk of bodies. In these medieval times, bathing is a luxury seldom afforded. Yet, there's a strange comfort in the shared scent of humanity. Your stomach growls a reminder of the day ahead. Perhaps there's a piece of yesterday's bread now, as hard as stone, waiting to be softened in ale. Yes, even the children partake in this weak brew, for it's often safer than the water that flows through the village. Let's pause here in this moment of quiet, before the storm, and reflect on what it means to live to survive in such a time. What stories would these walls tell if they could speak? What secrets do they hold as we centuries later listen in? In your quaint cottage, the morning light filters through the small, uneven windows, casting warm golden hues across the rustic walls. Beyond the safety of your home, the village is already a hive of activity. You can hear the distant rhythmic lowing of cattle, the lively clucking of chickens, and the cheerful calls of your neighbors as they set out to tackle another day of toil. Here in this close-knit community, life revolves around the land. Most are peasants, toiling as free tenants, their sweat a currency for the land they rent from the local lord, or as serfs tied to the earth by birth, their labor the price for the soil they till. Each day the sun dictates the rhythm of life, rising and falling, guiding the routine of your existence. The weeks are punctuated by the sonorous toll of church bells, calling you to mass, a ritual as constant as the heartbeat of the village. The years, they are marked by the relentless turning of seasons, the cycle of planting and harvesting, each phase a chapter in the book of your life. Yes, it is a life of toil, but it is the only life you've known, woven into the very fabric of your being. Yet unbeknownst to you, to all of Europe, a dark tide is rising, ready to sweep across the continent with a force that will reshape societies more profoundly than any war or famine could. The first murmurs of this impending doom reach your ears through the tales of a traveling merchant. He arrives with treasures from distant realms, silks that shimmer like the morning dew, spices that promise exotic flavors. But this visit, he brings more than goods. He brings stories, chilling stories of a devastating plague that has begun to ravage cities far along the trade routes. People are dying by the thousands, he warns, his voice tinged with fear, struck down by a fever, by swellings that promise death. Some villagers, their faces pale, make the sign of the cross and whisper prayers for protection. Others, perhaps in denial, scoff at the tales, dismissing them as mere travelers' exaggerations. Life for the moment seems to continue as it always has. But the whispers of this ominous threat linger, growing louder and more terrifying with each passing day. As autumn unfurls its leaves, the once quiet whispers of dread have transformed into resounding cries of desperation. The illness, a relentless specter, has now haunted the Mediterranean ports of Europe. Messina, Marseille, Venice. Ships once bustling with life now anchor with holds filled not with goods, but with the silent dead, their sailors having succumbed during their grim voyage. God save us all, your mother whispers, her voice trembling as she traces the sign of the cross, a plea for divine intervention. In your village, a palpable sense of foreboding takes root. What can one do against an enemy so invisible, so merciless? Some villagers hoard provisions, their cellars brimming with food, as if it could shield them from the disease. Others, seeking solace, spend their hours in church, their prayers echoing off the stone walls, a desperate call for protection from above. The local healer, her face lined with worry, gathers herbs and concoctions, though none dare to claim their effectiveness against this mysterious scourge. Winter arrives cloaked in its icy shroud, and with it, the first grim tidings from a neighboring village, just a half-day's journey away. The news is chilling, sudden, inexplicable deaths, victims racked by high fevers, parched with an unquenchable thirst, their bodies marred by ominous black swellings in their armpits and groins. Survival beyond 3 days is rare, a grim lottery of life and death. The village elders' faces, etched with concern, convene in the dim light of the meeting hall. Should they seal their village from the outside world? Or must trade and communication continue, a lifeline to the outside? Life must go on, they decide, but fear now courses through every heart like a silent river. One crisp morning, the mill's young worker does not appear. His absence a stark premonition. When a concerned villager checks on him, they find him in the throes of a fierce fever, his body drenched in sweat, his neck grotesquely swollen with a boil the size of a hen's egg. The plague has breached the sanctuary of your village, bringing with it an era of horror that no one could have foreseen. The disease, swift and merciless, turns health into frailty, vitality into despair. One day a person is well, the next they are feverish, and soon they are lost, leaving behind a village gripped by fear and loss. More often than not, those afflicted by this merciless scourge meet their demise in agony. The sinister black buboes, from which the Black Death derives its ominous moniker, unleash a torment that defies words. Imagine the harrowing sight of victims coughing up blood, a grim indication that the pestilence has invaded their lungs, and these poor souls seldom survive beyond a couple of days. Is it divine retribution? Some cry out, beating themselves in desperate acts of atonement for sins they believe have summoned this wrath. Others, clutching bouquets of flowers, assert it's the corrupted air, a noxious miasma they think is the harbinger of disease. Yet in hushed, fearful tones a few whisper that it's the Jews poisoning wells, an accusation as baseless as it is sinister, especially since your village hosts no Jewish residents. Little do you know, in this era of the 14th century, that the true culprit behind this rampant devastation is a bacterium named Yersinia pestis. This minuscule entity finds a home in the bellies of fleas, which in turn use rats as their unwitting couriers. These rodents, stowaways on ships and constant companions in towns and villages, have unknowingly become the vectors of death, spreading the plague across continents. When a flea infected with this deadly cargo bites a human, it injects the bacteria into the wound, where it multiplies with alarming speed, leading to the formation of those excruciating buboes. Should the bacteria infiltrate the lungs, it triggers pneumonic plague, a form that can leap from person to person with each cough, each breath. In your village, as in countless others across Europe, life as you knew it has been irrevocably altered by this plague. The church bells, once a comforting chime marking the passage of time and calling the faithful to prayer, now ring out in a relentless dirge for the departed. However, as the toll of death becomes too overwhelming, even the bells fall silent, their silence as deafening as their previous clamor. The dead are interred with haste, stripped of the pomp and ceremony that once honored the passage to the afterlife. What has become of the solemn rituals that once provided solace and dignity in death? In times past, death was a solemn passage from this earthly realm to the next. But now, bodies are unceremoniously carted away, destined for mass graves, where they lie alongside countless others. Imagine the sorrow, the sheer devastation of families, some so shattered by loss that there is no one left to perform the sacred duty of burial. Bodies remain in homes, a grim testament to the ravages of disease, until neighbors or parish officials, driven by necessity, take them away. Fear has woven itself into the very fabric of society, altering the essence of human interaction. Doors are barred to protect the healthy, while the sick find themselves shunned, isolated in their suffering. Some flee to the countryside, desperate for safety, believing distance might shield them from the scourge. Others, gripped by a fervor for salvation, march through the streets, their bodies marked by self-inflicted penance, hoping to appease divine wrath. The clergy, who should be pillars of comfort, are themselves falling like leaves in autumn. Their sacred duties compel them to offer solace to the dying, exposing them relentlessly to the contagion. Many flee, leaving their flocks to face their darkest hours alone. Those who remain often meet the same fate as their parishioners, succumbing to the illness they sought to minister. Yet amidst this chaos, your family has been a bastion of fortune. The plague swirls around you like a malevolent storm, yet your immediate household remains untouched by its icy fingers. You've heard tales, heart-wrenching stories of entire families erased, of children left to wander, only to perish shortly after, of lovers torn apart by death, mere hours after vowing undying love. But can your luck truly last in a world where the Black Death claims a third to half of all souls? One fateful morning, your younger brother murmurs of a malaise. By noon, he burns with a fever that seems to consume him. By evening, the dreaded swellings appear at his neck, marking the beginning of an all-too-familiar end. Your mother, her heart heavy with dread, dedicates herself to his care, soothing his fevered brow with cool cloths, coaxing him to sip water or weak ale, fighting against the inevitable with every ounce of her love. Your father standing at the threshold of despair, in a time when the very air seemed thick with the specter of death. Your brother's journey to the monastery was one of desperation. The monasteries, once sanctuaries of peace and healing, now echoed with the cries of the sick, their walls barely containing the suffering within. For 3 harrowing days, his condition deteriorated. The ominous boo swelled its hue, shifting from a furious red to a menacing black, a grotesque emblem of the plague's cruel touch. His breaths came in ragged gasps, each one a battle against the encroaching darkness, while his cries pierced the silence, a haunting melody of pain and delirium. As you and your family took turns at his side, a primal fear whispered in your ear to flee, to distance yourself from the contagion. Yet love held you there, a silent vigil amidst the storm. Then on the 4th day, a miracle unfolded. While the Grim Reaper claimed most at this juncture, your brother's fever unexpectedly broke. Though he was as weak as a newborn, his eyes, once clouded with delirium, now shone with a faint glimmer of life. The boo, still a grotesque presence, had softened, and over the coming days it burst, releasing its vile contents, a repulsive yet hopeful sign. Against all odds, your brother emerged as one of the few to survive the Black Death. Why him? This question would haunt you, its answer buried in the depths of his very being. Modern science would later reveal that some individuals possess a genetic anomaly known as Delta 32, a mutation that subtly alters the protein CCR5 on white blood cells, making it difficult for the plague's deadly bacteria to infiltrate and devastate. Perhaps this silent guardian was his ally, and maybe it was a gift shared by others in your lineage. This twist of fate, a mere chance in the grand lottery of genetics, granted certain families and individuals a sliver of hope against the darkest hour of human history. And in a strange twist of destiny, this same genetic quirk, centuries later, would offer protection against another scourge, HIV, the virus behind AIDS. The Black Death, in its merciless selection, had inadvertently sown seeds of resilience that would bloom long after its shadow had passed. But that tale, rich with its own layers of irony and hope, is for another chapter. As your family basks in the miraculous recovery of your brother, the village reels under the relentless assault of the plague. Not all are blessed with such fortune. Weeks turn into a blur of sorrow as the plague claims life after life. Your once vibrant village, a community of perhaps 200 souls, now dwindles to fewer than half. Fields stand barren, their caretakers either claimed by death or consumed by the grim tasks of nursing the sick and burying the deceased. High above in his stone fortress, the lord of the manor mourns his wife and 2 children. Wealth and status offer no shield against the indiscriminate wrath of the Black Death. Yet amidst this despair, some individuals stand as enigmas untouched by the scourge. The village gravedigger, a man of questionable morals, who pilfers from the dead, handles plague-ridden bodies daily, yet remains unscathed. Similarly, the midwife who divides her time between bringing new life into the world and tending to the ill defies the odds. Are they blessed by divine protection, or do they harbor a mysterious immunity? Medieval minds might ponder if these survivors have made pacts with darker powers. Food becomes a luxury as the harvests go untended and trade routes collapse. The cost of basic necessities skyrockets, while items believed to cure or ward off the plague herbs, exotic treatments, sacred relics reach prices that beggar belief, often unattainable. As winter's chill descends, the plague's fury wanes not due to human effort, but the natural ebb of the disease. Fleas retreat into dormancy, and rats huddle close to their nests. A flicker of hope ignites, whispering that perhaps the nightmare is over. But this hope is fleeting. The Black Death merely slumbers, waiting for the spring warmth to unleash its next wave of terror upon those who thought they had survived. Over the span of 4 harrowing years, from 1347 to 1351, wave upon wave of the Black Death surged across Europe, claiming between 75 to 200 million lives, potentially half of the continent's entire population. Imagine the devastation, the cries, the silence that followed. The world that rose from this abyss was irrevocably transformed. The catastrophic loss of life shattered the feudal system, elevating the value of labor and altering the power dynamics between the downtrodden peasants and the once unassailable nobility. As the dust settled, the survivors, like your brother, the gravedigger or the midwife, found themselves in a world unrecognizable from the one they had known. They were the lucky ones, yet they bore the heavy mantle of survival amidst such profound loss. In their hands lay the task of rebuilding societies, redefining their relationships with authority, and slowly forging a new era from the ruins of the old. This period, steeped in both tragedy and transformation, set Europe on a path toward modernity. But let us pause here, for the tale of tomorrow's world can wait until the morrow. Tonight, as you feel the gentle pull of sleep, picture yourself as one of those medieval survivors. Gaze upon the first stars twinkling above your village. The plague has retreated, if only for now. You've endured humanity's darkest hour. And though you're not yet aware, you stand on the brink of a new world born from the ashes of the old. The night wraps you in its embrace, your breathing harmonizing with the distant bark of a dog, the whispering rustle of leaves. Despite the overwhelming sorrow, despite the unimaginable suffering, life persists. In this simple, profound truth lies the essence of the Black Death's most poignant lesson: humanity's extraordinary ability to endure, to adapt, and ultimately to prevail. The dawn that follows your brother's miraculous recovery dawns with a peculiar blend of emotions. A wave of relief certainly washes over you, yet it carries with it the undercurrents of an unfamiliar sentiment. Why were we spared when countless others perished? This strange survivor's guilt, a feeling of unworthiness amidst the widespread agony, haunts many who endure such tragedies. Your brother, though weak now, has eyes that gleam with newfound clarity. The drained boil at his neck has left behind an unsightly scar, a stark reminder of his encounter with death. But what is a scar compared to the grave? Each day of his recovery is treated by your family as the precious gift it is. One evening, amidst the soft glow of a rush candle, your brother's voice, still hoarse from his ordeal, breaks the silence. Why did I live when so many others died? He wonders aloud. Your mother, pausing in her task of lighting the candle, responds with a simple, "It's God's will," though her voice hints at her own reservations. The truth beyond the grasp of 14th century comprehension weaves a far more intricate tale. Throughout the annals of human history, infectious diseases have sculpted humanity through natural selection. Those blessed with genetic advantages against certain pathogens survive more frequently, passing these protective traits on to their descendants. The Black Death stands as perhaps the most stark illustration of this natural process. Deep within your brother's cells, and possibly yours, resides a genetic mutation that modifies a protein known as CCR5 on the surface of white blood cells. This mutation, dubbed Delta 32, results in a truncated version of the protein, making it exceedingly difficult for the plague bacterium to infiltrate and commandeer these immune cells. Some individuals possess one copy of this mutation, offering partial protection. But those few incredibly fortunate ones with two copies, they might just carry the key to survival in their very DNA. As your brother emerges, a survivor of the Grim Reaper's recent dance through your village, he steps into a world transformed by the cruel hand of fate. The gardens, once a testament to human care, now sprawl untamed, a wild testament to the absence of their keepers. Homes once filled with the warmth of life now echo with emptiness, their owners either claimed by death or driven away in despair. The once familiar symphony of village life, the clanging of the blacksmith's hammer, the rhythmic dance of the weaver's loom, the steady grind of the miller's wheel, has been silenced, leaving behind a haunting stillness. Yet within this desolation, the human spirit flickers resiliently. A market day, though smaller and quieter, buzzes with a fierce determination to reclaim life from the jaws of loss. Farmers, their faces etched with the hardships of the season, bring their scant harvests. A daring merchant, perhaps driven by bravery or desperation, arrives with his wares, salt spices, and tales from afar. His stories are of a world in mourning, yet also of rebirth. Devastation followed by a hesitant recovery. No region remains untouched, though the cruelty of the disease seems to have played favorites, sparing some while decimating others. Cities, with their crowded, unsanitary conditions, have borne the brunt of the plague's fury. Conversely, remote villages nestled in the embrace of mountains or shrouded by ancient forests have been kinder cradles of life. In your region, the toll has been severe, perhaps half the community lost to the dark embrace of death. The merchants' tales are chilling entire towns, now silent monasteries where monks lie unburied, noble houses left to the dust without a single heir to claim them. But amidst these tales of sorrow, there are glimmers of hope. He speaks of communities where life persists with a semblance of normality, of neighbors banding together to support the orphaned and widowed, of small acts of kindness piercing through the overwhelming darkness. One story in particular captures the imagination, a beacon of light in this tapestry of despair, illustrating the indomitable will to not just survive, but to thrive. Imagine, if you will, a village not unlike your own, where tragedy struck in the form of a relentless plague. Within the span of a mere week, Elizabeth, a woman of great fortitude, lost her husband and 6 children to this merciless scourge. With her heart heavy with sorrow, she single-handedly carried each lifeless body to a hillside left behind their modest home, laying them to rest in the cold earth, one by one. Yet, in a twist of fate, or perhaps divine protection, Elizabeth never succumbed to the illness. Just like your brother and the village gravedigger, she seemed blessed with an innate immunity, a shield that science would later recognize as genetic. The whispers began to swirl like leaves in the autumn wind. "She must be a witch," the merchant confides, in hushed tones, his eyes darting around, though no one else is near to hear. How else could she touch the dead and remain unscathed? Some villagers, driven by fear and desperation, even contemplated drowning her in the pond. However, the majority in their grief were simply thankful for her willingness to perform the grim task of burial. In times of such despair, when survival itself seems a miracle, those who defy the odds, especially women living alone, or those with peculiarities, often become targets of suspicion. Fear, that insidious companion of the plague, breeds its own dark rumors and superstitions. Your father, having listened intently to the merchant's tales, shakes his head in disbelief. No witchcraft in survival. He asserts with a firm voice, "Some are just naturally stronger against the sickness, like my son." He places a proud, firm hand on your brother's shoulder, a gesture of both acknowledgement and defense. The merchant, ever the diplomat, nods in agreement, careful not to stir discord. "True enough," he concedes. "In every village there are those the plague cannot touch. Perhaps they are God's chosen." As the chill of winter descends, bringing with it an early darkness and biting cold, your village finds itself adapting to a new reality. With fewer mouths to feed, the food stores stretch longer than usual, a small solace. Yet with this comes the stark realization there are now fewer hands to tend to the daily necessities, to chop wood, to mend homes, to care for the livestock, and to perform the myriad of tasks that keep life's wheel turning. In those days of yore, when the Black Death stalked the land, the very fabric of society began to fray at the edges, revealing new patterns beneath. Imagine the world where labor was once as plentiful as grass in a meadow, now as scarce as gold. Your father, a master craftsman with hands that could coax wood into art, found himself suddenly indispensable. The lord of the manor, who once would have demanded his service with a mere flick of his wrist, now approached him with a humble plea. 3 days of work, a silver penny, and a side of bacon, your father recounted to your mother, his voice tinged with disbelief. Such bounty was unimaginable before the plague. Indeed, with death having claimed half the artisans in the region, those who remained were not just workers, but treasures, their skills coveted like jewels. This shift in power dynamics rippled through every stratum of society. Farmhands, once as common as daisies, now found themselves in a position to demand wages that once would have seemed like the stuff of legends. Household servants, those with the savvy to manage a grand estate, were suddenly in vogue among the nobility, their numbers so thinned by the disease that every experienced hand was worth its weight in gold. But what of the women in this reshaped world? Widows who might have rushed into another's arms for security now stood firm, choosing the path of independence. They took up the reins of businesses their late husbands left behind, breaking through the once rigid barriers of guild restrictions. In a neighboring village, a woman took charge of her husband's forge, Her hammer strikes echoing like a call to arms against tradition, yet providing a vital service that none could deny. And for the serfs, those bound to the soil by ancient law, the plague was a grim reaper of their chains. Lords desperate to keep their lands tilled offered freedom to those willing to stay. Others, seeing the opportunity, fled to towns or other estates where life promised to be kinder. With the specter of death so close, who would dare enforce the old rules when hands to work the fields were so few? Thus the world turned reshaped by loss, yet burgeoning with new possibilities. But let us pause and reflect on the profound changes that sweep through European society like a silent revolution beneath the surface. The feudal system, that age-old structure binding the lives of countless generations, does not crumble in a mere moment. Yet, in these early years after the plague, seeds of transformation are sown, seeds that will sprout into a new era in the coming decades. Within the intimate circle of your family life adjusts to the rhythm of this new reality with a mixture of resilience and adaptation. Your brother, once weakened by the illness, now regains his strength, though his energy is not what it once was. Your father, a humble carpenter, suddenly finds his skills in high demand, his labor now fetching wages that were once beyond dreams. Your mother, with her nimble hands, takes in washing from the manor house, her efforts now rewarded more generously due to the scarcity of labor. And you, dear child, find yourself at the cusp of opportunities that would have been unimaginable before the plague's shadow fell. The parish priest, a steadfast figure who remained when others fled, requires assistance in maintaining the sacred records of the church. With a literacy that marks you as unique among peasant children, a gift from your mother's past service in a noble household, you are perfectly suited for this role. As spring breathes life back into the world, it brings with it a dual sentiment, hope and trepidation. The fields burst forth with new crops. The meadows are kissed by wildflowers, and the skies are filled with the melodies of returning birds. Yet, with this rejuvenation, comes the lurking fear of the plague's return. Sure enough, by early summer, whispers of new cases echo through the village. This second wave, though less ferocious, reopens wounds that are still tender, reminding us of the fragility of our existence. One afternoon, as you meticulously update the parish death register, a document that grows longer by the day, you find yourself wrestling with a profound question. Father, you inquire, your voice tinged with both curiosity and fear. Why did God send the plague? The priest, his face etched with the lines of countless sorrows, pauses before responding. Some say it's punishment for sin. He begins, his voice a mix of wisdom and weariness. In the midst of this relentless ordeal, voices echo with despair and bewilderment. Is it not a divine trial of our faith? They ponder. The Pope himself, a beacon of hope in these dark times, has beseeched the masses to turn to prayer and penance in hopes of quelling this scourge. With a heavy heart, he dips his quill into the ink, inscribing yet another name onto the register of the afflicted. Yet, here I stand, having witnessed the most devout perish in torment, while the most notorious sinners walk the earth unscathed. How many nights have I spent my prayers whispered beside the beds of innocent children, only to watch the plague claim them. He sighs a deep, resonant sound of confusion and sorrow. Perhaps, he muses, It is not for us to fathom God's grand design. This crisis, this shaking of faith, reverberates through the cobblestone streets and into the hearts of communities across Europe. The plague, in its cruel indifference, mocks medieval religious doctrine. If indeed it is a punishment from above, why does it strike both the virtuous and the sinful with equal ferocity? If prayer and penance are the antidotes, why then do the most devout monasteries, those bastions of piety, suffer some of the highest death tolls? The once unassailable authority of the Church in matters of earthly afflictions now begins to fracture fissures that would only grow in the centuries ahead. Medical knowledge, too, is put to the test, found wanting. Physicians schooled in the grand halls of Europe's finest universities find themselves no more adept at curing the plague than the humble village healer. Their complex theories, grounded in the balance of bodily humors and the whims of celestial bodies, crumble before the indiscriminate nature of the disease. Why do some recover while others succumb? Why do some villages endure greater losses? Some physicians with bravery that stirs the soul tend to the sick, often at the cost of their own lives. Others, gripped by fear, flee at the mere whisper of an outbreak, choosing self-preservation over the call of duty. In this void of effective official intervention, communities forge their own paths. They clutch at talismans, murmur ancient charms, and steer clear of anything black in a desperate bid to ward off the specter of death. In the heart of your village, where the cobblestone paths whisper tales of old, a new chapter unfolds, steeped in both tragedy and transformation. Imagine the sight of white crosses stark against the wooden doors, marking houses where the shadow of plague has fallen. It's a poignant sight, a desperate plea for protection in a time when every measure feels like grasping at straws. These symbols, alongside other community-devised strategies, serve as a bulwark, however fragile, against the relentless tide of disease. As the days grow longer, your village adopts these measures with a fervent hope. Strangers, those from beyond the village bounds, must first endure a 3-day vigil in a secluded hut. It's a lonely wait, a test of patience and health, ensuring no hidden plague slips through. The dead, once vibrant members of your community are now laid to rest. With haste, their earthly possessions consigned to flames in a ritual of purification. Yet these precautions, though they offer some shield, cannot entirely ward off the specter of the plague. By the time midsummer arrives, the village has mourned a dozen more souls victims of the second, more insidious wave. Among them, a figure of significance, the lord of the manor himself, a man in his prime, who had once survived only to be claimed by this relentless foe. His demise sends shockwaves through the social fabric, leaving a void filled by his young son, a mere 20 years old, fresh from the intellectual ferment of Paris. This new lord, with his mind teeming with progressive ideas, approaches the stewardship of the manor with a fresh perspective. He sees the world not as his father did, but through the lens of change. Recognizing the scarcity of labor, he extends an olive branch to the tenant farmers, offering them not just better terms, but a glimpse of freedom. For those with unique skills like your father, there are privileges once thought unattainable. It's a bold move, a beacon of hope in a time of despair. Yet not all embrace this new dawn. In neighboring lands, some lords clinging to the vestiges of old power tighten their grip. They enforce ancient restrictions with a harshness born of fear, attempting to preserve a crumbling order. But as history whispers, such efforts are but temporary as the winds of change are unstoppable, reshaping the very essence of societal structure. Peasants driven by the relentless pursuit of a brighter future simply depart, seeking greener pastures and better conditions in distant lands. With land sprawling as far as the eye can see, and workers as scarce as hen's tea, they encounter no shortage of opportunities. As the second wave of the plague finally ebbs with the crisp arrival of autumn, your village stands resilient, though significantly diminished. Of the once bustling 200 souls, a mere 90 remain, their spirits unbroken. The fields, now vast and consolidated, prioritize the most fertile soils for cultivation. Houses once filled with laughter and life now stand desolate, their timbers and thatch pilfered for other purposes. Yet life with its indomitable spirit finds a way to normalize, even in the wake of such devastation. Children once again frolic in the village square, their laughter a balm to weary hearts. The eternal rhythms of agricultural life, planting, nurturing, harvesting, persist, adapted to the slimmer ranks of the workforce. Weddings fill the air with joy, and the cries of newborns herald the promise of renewal. Commerce, the lifeblood of any community, resumes its flow. Then, on a clear, radiant autumn day, a surprising visitor graces the village. A mason who had ventured out years prior to chase dreams in the city's returns. He had built a good life in Florence. He recounts working on the awe-inspiring cathedral there. But when the plague struck, it ravaged the city with a ferocity unmatched in rural areas. I watched half of Florence perish. He confesses, his eyes haunted by the shadows of those grim days. The rich fled to their estates, but where could the poor go? Bodies accumulated in the streets at a pace that outstripped burial efforts. I survived, though how only God knows. With the worst behind, work on the cathedral ceased. Priorities shifted to the essential task of rebuilding. Finding himself adrift without steady employment, the mason chose to return to his roots. His tale, while unique in its details, echoes a broader shift. Across Europe, the plague temporarily reverses the centuries-old trend of urbanization. Cities with their crowded conditions become petri dishes for disease-driving survivors to the countryside, where they seek refuge in the expansive open spaces and the embrace of smaller communities. This urban exodus, though born from tragedy, unexpectedly breathes new life into rural villages like yours. People return not just to survive, but to thrive anew. The world, it seems, has opened up like a blooming flower, its petals unfurling to reveal new horizons and possibilities. With the return of those who ventured to the cities, our village brims with fresh tales of urban life, of groundbreaking technologies, and of governance that defies the ancient feudal norms. Imagine the mason with his stories of Florence, where power does not rest in the hands of a noble born to rule, but in the capable hands of elected merchants. He speaks with awe of mechanical clocks that carve the day into precise segments of water systems that deliver purity to the city's heart, and of banking that stretches trade beyond the wildest dreams of old. These seeds of change, once planted, find eager soil in our community, already restless with the desire for transformation. Oh, how the plague has left its mark. not just in the scars it has etched upon our bodies, but in the very fabric of our beliefs. Through the cracks in the medieval tapestry, a new worldview emerges vibrant and full of potential. For you and your family life unfolds in this new landscape rich with opportunity. Your brother, having danced with death and lived now apprentices under the mason, his future bright with the promise of skilled labor in high demand. Your father, his carpentry, now fetches prices that would have been laughed at before the plague, ensuring comfort and security. Your mother, her hands no longer worn from washing, tend to an herb garden, her remedies now sought after a balm for a community bereft of its healers. And you, with your quick wit and literacy, assist the priest, your value magnified in a world where such skills are treasures. In the olden days, your birth would have sealed your fate, but now, in this post-plague era, where boundaries blur and talent is king, your future stretches out like the vast unexplored plains. As your family gathers around the hearth, the warmth of the fire, mirroring the warmth in your hearts, you share a meal richer than any you dared to hope for in the past. Here, in this moment, the world feels both smaller and infinitely larger, a paradox of new beginnings. As the pre-play years unfold, your father articulates the unspoken thoughts that linger in the minds of many. "It's a terrible thing to say," he starts, his voice tinged with reluctance, but for those of us who've made it through life now, shines brighter than ever before. Your mother, her eyes reflecting a slow, thoughtful nod, echoes his sentiment. More food graces our tables, our wages stretch further, and the air we breathe tastes of freedom. Yet this newfound prosperity, this glimmer of hope, is built upon a foundation of countless graves, a stark, uncomfortable paradox at the core of this post-plague world. For the fortunate ones, those who've dodged death through sheer genetic luck, like your brother, or by the grace of circumstance or seclusion from the infectious scourge, the new world unfurls with opportunities that were mere fantasies in the dense, stratified society of old. The drastic drop in population has birthed a landscape ripe for social climbing, economic flourishing, and personal liberation possibilities once locked away by the rigid hierarchies of the past. But oh, the price of these advantages. The loss of millions. Families, shattered communities, torn asunder, and with them, the rich tapestry of knowledge and culture now threads lost to time. No one can bask in their newfound fortunes without the looming shadow of this grim reality. As you surrender to the pull of sleep that night, your mind wanders to the future. The plague may have retreated for now, but who dares to believe it's gone for good? It will return, as it has always done, with new waves of death. Yet, humanity, resilient and ever adapting, will meet it with new strategies, slowly amassing the knowledge that centuries hence will vanquish this invisible foe. Unbeknownst to you, you stand at a historical precipice. From the ashes of this Black Death, a new world will rise, fundamentally transformed. The seeds of a renaissance are sprouting in these years of recovery. The iron grip of feudalism begins its slow, inevitable decline. The once unquestioned power of traditional structures, both sacred and secular, now trembles on its foundations. And biologically, the plague itself has begun to rewrite the very essence of life. Oh, the grand tapestry of humanity, woven with threads of resilience and adaptability. Your brother's triumph over adversity is not just a tale of personal victory. It is an epoch in the epic saga of our species, a dance with the infinitesimal foes that both cradle and challenge us. As the dawn of a new era breaks upon your altered reality, you will persist in the noble work of reconstruction, of evolution, of forging a path through the aftermath. This is the eternal refrain of plague survivors, echoing through the annals of history, carrying the heavy mantle of memory, yet ever gazing toward the horizon of hope. In their perseverance, they mold the world anew, their echoes reverberating through time. The narrative of survival we've traced from the dark days of the 14th century's Black Death is but one verse in the vast symphony of human endurance and genetic fortune. Now, as the gentle embrace of sleep claims you, let us embark on a journey through the corridors of time to another village, another plague, another testament to human spirit and sacrifice. 3 centuries have elapsed since those first devastating ripples of the Black Death washed over Europe. We now stand in the summer of 1665 in Eyam, a quaint village nestled in the charming hills of Derbyshire, England. Pronounced simply as Eyam, this serene hamlet is home to around 800 souls, farmers and miners, their lives entwined with the rich veins of lead beneath the limestone. Here life unfolds to the gentle cadence of rural England. Villagers awaken with the sun, nurture their fields and livestock, toil in the modest industries, partake in services at St. Lawrence Parish Church, and converge at the local tavern to exchange stories and camaraderie. Eyam, a community where every face is familiar, where lineage stretches back through the generations, where the bonds of kinship are as enduring as the land itself. Here in this peaceful enclave, the stage is set for a story that will etch itself into the collective memory of humanity. In the tranquil village of Eyam, nestled amidst the serene Derbyshire hills, the bonds of neighborly care have been forged through shared joys and hardships. Yet, unbeknownst to its inhabitants, they are about to confront an unimaginable ordeal, one destined to etch their village's name into the annals of history and immortalize their collective sacrifice in legend. The plague, that grim spectre known still to Londoners as the Black Death, has reared its ugly head once more in England. In the bustling, crowded streets of the capital, this relentless disease, now identified scientifically as the bubonic plague, is carving a deadly path. By the time its wrath subsides, it will have claimed the lives of approximately 100,000 Londoners, a staggering quarter of the city's population. This outbreak will be remembered as the Great Plague of London, the last of its kind in England's history. For the moment, the villagers of Eyam feel cloaked in safety, their isolation a shield against urban woes. They reassure themselves that the plague is a city problem, unlikely to infiltrate their secluded community far removed from the hustle of trade routes and urban centers. But fate, with its cruel irony, has other plans. In late August 1665, a seemingly innocuous package arrives in Eyam, addressed to the local rector Alexander Hadfield. Inside a bundle of cloth from London, perhaps the latest in fashion or fabrics not available locally, lies innocently. Hadfield's assistant, George Vickers, who resides with the rector and his family, eagerly unpacks the parcel. The cloth, damp from its long journey, is hung by the fire to dry, unwittingly releasing a deadly stowaway hidden within its fibers. Days later, George Vickers is struck with a raging fever. his body succumbing to the plague bacterium Yersinia pestis that had lurked within the cloth. The village watches in horror as this once robust young man deteriorates swiftly. By September 7th, 1665, George Vickers is no more becoming the first plague victim in Am. Panic like a silent storm begins to ripple through the village. What fate awaits them? What sacrifices will they endure? The questions hang heavy in the air, as palpable as the fear itself. As September draws to a close, the community of Am finds itself engulfed in an ever-tightening grip of despair. 4 more souls have passed, all from homes close to the vicar's lodgings, signaling the plague's ominous first foothold. With the turning of autumn leaves, the situation deteriorates further. Village after village succumbs to the illness, and the death toll soars, leaving some families devastated, losing multiple members within mere days of one another. The gravediggers, their shovels, never resting struggle to keep up with the relentless march of death. In such dire times, flight becomes the natural instinct. In London, the affluent, including King Charles II and his court, have long since escaped to the tranquility of country estates, seeking sanctuary from the plague's grasp. Similarly, the well-off of Am begin to pack their eyes set on uninfected havens where they might wait out the storm. But at this pivotal moment, an extraordinary proposition emerges, one that will alter the fate of countless lives far beyond Am's borders, even if it means sealing many within to a grim fate. William Mompesson, the newly appointed rector of Am, and his predecessor, Thomas Stanley. Despite their divergent religious paths, Mompesson, of the established Church of England, and Stanley, a staunch Puritan, forge a united front. They approach the village with a plan as bold as it is heart-wrenching. They suggest that Am voluntarily isolate itself to become a self-imposed quarantine zone. No one in, no one out. The plague, they argue, must be confined within their boundaries, a sacrifice to shield the surrounding areas from its deadly touch. It's a request that staggers the mind. Essentially, the villagers are being asked to lay down their lives to accept that many more will perish, all to save strangers. Yet, in a display of unparalleled selflessness, they consent. The village boundary transforms into a stark line of demarcation, a cordon sanitaire between life and death, which no resident of Am will dare cross. Beyond this line, food and supplies are left at designated stones by outsiders, notably the Earl of Devonshire from nearby Chatsworth, a gesture of solidarity in these darkest of times. In the shadow of the village of Am, a house stands as a beacon of hope, where the heart of a community beats strongest. Here, a compassionate soul pledges to sustain the isolated villagers, delivering provisions that are vital for their survival. The payment for these goods is left in vinegar-soaked crevices of the rocks, a poignant ritual, believed to cleanse the coins of the plague's deadly touch. As the seasons shift, summer fading into autumn, autumn into the harsh grip of winter, and winter thawing into the renewal of spring, the plague's relentless grip tightens on Am. Families crumble under the weight of sorrow. Children are orphaned, only to follow their parents into the silence of death within days. Homes once filled with the warmth of life now echo with emptiness. The churchyard overflows, forcing the living to bury their beloved in makeshift graves, in gardens and fields. Amidst this heartrending backdrop, individual tales of heroism and resilience emerge, painting a vivid picture of humanity's spirit. Elizabeth Hancock, a farmer's wife at Riley Farm on the village's edge, faces a loss that seems to stretch the bounds of human endurance. In a mere 8 days of August 1666, the plague snatches her husband and 6 children. Abandoned by neighbors, paralyzed by fear, Elizabeth alone bears the weight of her grief. With her own hands, she drags each lifeless body to a nearby field, digging their final resting places. What stands out in Elizabeth's story is not only her unimaginable strength, but the miraculous fact that she remains untouched by the plague, despite her intimate contact with the disease. Could it be the CCR5 Delta 32 genetic mutation, the same protective shield that saved others in our earlier tales that shielded her from the plague's wrath? Today, the Riley graves, a silent tribute to her suffering and survival, still stand as a testament to her undying spirit. In another corner of this tragic narrative, Marshall Howe emerges as Ames' unofficial gravedigger, shouldering a burden that few would dare to carry. In the shadowy corners of history where the noble and the nefarious intertwine, we find Marshall. How a man not driven by altruism, but by greed. He prowls through the abandoned homes of the departed, his hands not for healing but for plundering, before he hastily disposes of their earthly remains. His actions, though repugnant, entwine with a tale that piques medical intrigue. Howe's life becomes a dance with death itself. He grapples with dozens, perhaps hundreds of plague-stricken bodies entering houses that others shun like the very gates of hell. By all rights, he should have been the first to succumb to the grim reaper's call. Yet, defying all odds, Marshall Howe emerges unscathed, untouched by the disease that ravaged so many. What could explain this anomaly? Modern science whispers a revelation, a protective genetic mutation. A tiny twist in his DNA shields him from the plague's lethal embrace. What Howe believed to be mere luck or divine favor is in reality his body's silent weapon in humanity's relentless war against microscopic foes. Then there's the poignant saga of Emmett Seidel and Roland Tora, young hearts torn asunder by the cruel decree of quarantine. Emmett, ensnared within Am and Roland from a village just beyond the quarantine line, find themselves abruptly divided by fate. Refusing to let go completely, they devise a way to meet, albeit at a safe distance across Cucklet Dell, a ravine marking the village's boundary. There they stand, separated by space, yet united by love, their voices carrying words of solace and affection over the chasm. These fleeting encounters, these whispers across the divide, are their lifeline through the early months of isolation. But as spring ripens into the harsh summer of 1666, and the plague tightens its grip on Emmett's visits cease, Roland, ever faithful, calls out to her day after day, his voice echoing unanswered. It is only after the quarantine's bitter end that Roland discovers the heart-wrenching truth. Emmett had perished in April, one of the many claimed by the relentless plague. In this heart-wrenching chapter of our tale, the young victims of the plague find their love stories tragically abbreviated by the cruel hand of disease. Yet, from this sorrow emerges a tale of steadfast devotion, a legend that whispers through the annals of time in the village of I Am. Among the most peculiar of these stories is that of Margaret Blackwell, who in the throes of plague fever was abandoned to her fate by her own brother Francis. In her delirious state, she stumbled into the kitchen, driven by a desperate thirst. Mistaking a container of bacon fat for milk, she drank deeply of the greasy substance. Astonishingly, Margaret survived. For generations, the villagers recounted this tale, claiming that bacon fat held the power to vanquish the plague. Yet, the truth might be more intricate. Margaret likely possessed a genetic resilience, and her recovery might have occurred regardless of her unusual choice of drink. Nevertheless, this legend endured a poignant testament to the frantic search for any cure amidst the plague's relentless assault. Amidst this chaos, the village's spiritual leaders offered what solace they could. William Merson, who alongside Thomas Stanley advocated for the quarantine, suffered a profound personal loss. His wife Catherine contracted the plague while tending to the afflicted and passed away in his arms in August 1666 during the peak of the outbreak. Merson, in his grief, described himself as a dying man, though he survived physically. In a letter to his children sent away before the quarantine, he penned, "The condition of this place is very sad. I entreat you to fly this place. I am not in a condition to receive comfort from you. I am so weak, I can write no more." Despite his overwhelming sorrow, he continued to minister to his beleaguered congregation until the very end. Church services were moved outdoors to Cucklet Dell, where the fresh air was thought to lessen the risk of contagion. Villagers stood far apart, their eyes reflecting both fear and hope, as they sought divine intervention in these desperate times. In those harrowing times, the villagers of Ayam stood apart from one another as they sought divine intervention, practicing what we now recognize as social distancing. Even as death seemed to loom in every shadow, they clung to their spiritual practices, drawing comfort from familiar rituals, even as the very fabric of their world unraveled around them. Yet, not all held fast to virtue. There were moments of desperation, instances of looting neighbors turning away from each other, panic trumping compassion. One villager, Mary Cooper, in a desperate bid for safety, tried to escape the quarantine, fleeing towards Sheffield, only to be caught and brought back to Ayam. But these were the exceptions, the dark blots on an otherwise heroic tapestry. The overwhelming narrative of Ayam is one of profound collective sacrifice for the common good. By November 1666, when the plague had run its devastating course, it had ravaged the village for 14 grueling months. From the approximately 800 souls present at the outbreak's onset, only about 340 remained. Entire family lines were snuffed out, leaving a village scarred, its social fabric shredded with wounds that would take generations to heal. Yet their sacrifice was not in vain. The plague was contained within Ayam's borders, sparing the surrounding communities the same fate. Thousands of lives were preserved by the deliberate decision of a few hundred to face death rather than spread it. In the quiet aftermath, as the survivors embarked on the daunting task of rebuilding their shattered lives, they could not foresee the legacy they were crafting. They could not imagine that centuries later, their story would echo as a testament to extraordinary communal courage and sacrifice. They were unaware that the plague which had so mercilessly devastated their village was to be the last major outbreak of the bubonic plague in England. The particular strain of Yersinia pestis that struck in the 1660s would not revisit their land with such ferocity again. The survivors of Ayam could not have foreseen how their resilience would shape the future. They were unaware that the passage of time would render their once effective strategies less practical, or that advancements in sanitation and housing would gradually diminish the rat populations responsible for spreading the disease. They had no inkling that scientists in the centuries to come would delve deeply into their lineage, uncovering unusually high occurrences of the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation among those whose ancestors survived AM. This discovery would provide compelling evidence of how infectious diseases can sculpt human evolution through the relentless force of natural selection. Nor could they have imagined the profound relevance their story would hold in the early 21st century, when another global catastrophe would compel humanity to confront agonizing decisions about isolation, quarantine, and the sacrifices necessary for the greater good. In their time, all they knew was survival, a survival that felt almost miraculous. They had witnessed the heartbreaking demise of neighbors, friends, and kin, often by the dozens. They endured self-imposed isolation through scorching summers and bitter winters, battling fear, grief, and loss that seemed to stretch beyond the limits of human endurance. Now, as the plague's grip began to loosen on their village, they faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives. Immediately, they encountered practical hurdles. Fields lay neglected, businesses had crumbled, and homes were in shambles. Traditional family structures were shattered, leaving orphaned children in need of homes and widows and widowers pondering remarriage. Property ownership became a tangled web when entire families vanished from the earth. Yet, the indomitable human spirit, which we've seen echoed in tales of plague throughout history, rose once again. From the ashes of broken families, new ones formed. Distant relatives returned, breathing life into the forsaken village, and those with valuable skills found themselves not just surviving, but thriving. The plague, though a merciless teacher, had redistributed the community's resources and roles, paving the way for a new chapter in AIM's history. The survivors, those who by chance or innate resilience withstood the storm of the plague, are the cornerstone upon which the village of Ayam will rise anew. Their progeny, unknowing bearers of a genetic shield against such scourges, will walk through centuries without realizing the silent protection woven into their very essence. Yet for some, the scars etched upon their souls are indelible. Elizabeth Hancock, who with her own trembling hands committed her family to the earth, eventually finds solace in new love and children. But whispers among the villagers tell of a woman forever altered her gaze, occasionally drifting into a distant haunted realm where the specters of her lost kin linger. Marshall. How the gravedigger whose survival seemed a defiance of fate finds himself shunned. His immunity, once a marvel, now casts a long shadow over his deeds. The villagers, while needing his services in the darkest of times, now question his morality, his pilfering of the dead unforgotten. William Merson, shattered by the loss of his dear Catherine, departs Eyam in 1669, seeking solace elsewhere. He marries again, living to a ripe old age, yet his correspondence brim with the pain of those plague-stricken months, a testament to a love that time could not erase. As for Ayam itself, the village slowly regains its heartbeat, though some names vanish from its annals, their lines extinguished. The quarantine, once a desperate measure, becomes enshrined in local lore, a tale of both pride and profound sorrow. With the Victorian era's fascination for the dramatic and historical Ayam story re-emerges, transforming the village into a beacon for those drawn to its tragic legacy. The Riley Graves boundary stones and other relics of that time stand as mute witnesses to the past. By the dawn of the 21st century, Ayam has become a hallowed ground on the map of heritage tourism, where visitors come not only to see but to feel the echoes of a village that once stood alone against an invisible foe. In the heart of Derbyshire, the village museum unfolds the grim tale of the plague and the subsequent quarantine that gripped the community. The parish church, adorned with artifacts and memorials, whispers the stories of those lost to time. Annually since 1866, a Plague Sunday service has been held, a poignant reminder of the village's profound sacrifice. Yet, is not merely a relic of the past. It is a vibrant community where the descendants of those who survived the scourge of 1665 to 66 still dwell. Their surnames, Hancocks, Siddles, Blackwells, echo through the streets, and genetic tests reveal that some still carry the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation, a genetic shield that might have spared their forebears. What does this tell us about history? Is it merely a series of events to be learned by rote? No, the tale of reminds us that history is the tapestry of human lives woven with threads of extraordinary resilience and sacrifice. It's about real people making real choices, their decisions shaping not just their own destinies, but the very fabric of our world today. As you drift deeper into slumber, let the image of Village linger in your mind, peaceful, picturesque, with its quaint stone cottages and blooming gardens belying the tragedy it once knew. Yet the past lingers in the memorial plaques, in the preserved boundary stones, and in the meticulously cared-for Riley graves on the hillside. The villagers, in choosing isolation, knew well the death toll it would exact. They could not have foreseen how enduring their story would be, or how deeply it would resonate through time. Their actions were driven by immediate concern for their neighbors, not for accolades or remembrance. This perhaps is what imbues their sacrifice with such profound power. They acted out of a simple yet profound sense of duty, without expectation of reward or recognition. In today's world, where self-interest often overshadows communal good, stands as a beacon, illuminating the path of altruism, a testament to what human beings can achieve when they act with the collective welfare at heart. As we journey back to the aftermath of the 14th century's Black Death, let's reflect on the resilience of humanity. Tomorrow night, we'll delve into how the world was forever changed by these plague outbreaks. We'll examine how societies pieced themselves back together, how the very frameworks of power shifted, and how the biological legacy of plague resistance still echoes through our modern existence. But for now, let the valor of Ames Village, with its silent stories of sacrifice, survival, and hope, lull you into a thoughtful slumber. Now imagine yourself once again in the village we explored earlier, but it is now the year 1352. The relentless waves of the plague have finally receded, leaving behind a landscape irrevocably altered. As you wander through the village, once bustling with 200 souls, you now encounter perhaps only 90 survivors. The cottages once full of life now stand as ghostly reminders, their roofs sagging, their gardens choked by relentless weeds. Yet amidst this haunting desolation, seeds of change are sprouting, changes that will fundamentally transform medieval society. In the fields that encircle this village, the transformation is starkly evident. Before the plague, every scrap of land was tilled, even the poorest soils that barely yielded a harvest. Population pressures had forced farmers to cultivate increasingly marginal lands in their desperate quest to feed expanding families. Now, with so many lives extinguished, the land lies in abundance. Survivors have the luxury of choice. They abandon the least fertile fields, focusing their efforts on the richest soils. Can you picture it? The once crowded fields now breathe with space, a poignant testament to both loss and opportunity. Imagine the breathtaking transformation that sweeps across the land, where once the sweat and toil of peasant families barely sufficed to fill their own bellies after the heavy burden of taxes and tithes. Now the fields, kissed by the sun, yield a bounty that overflows. For those who have weathered the storm of apocalyptic mortality, food becomes not just a daily sustenance, but an abundance that feels nothing short of miraculous. Oh, what a divine twist of fate, that after centuries teetering on the brink of starvation, a veritable feast now graces their tables. And with this newfound plenty, diets evolve. Before the plague's cruel hand, the peasantry's existence was a monotonous cycle of grain-based sustenance, bread, porridge, ale, with meat and elusive luxury. But now, with fewer souls to feed and vast swathes of land lying fallow, many turn their fields into pastures for livestock. Meat, cheese, and butter, once mere whispers in their dreams, now become familiar sights on even the humblest of tables. The very stature of the people, diminished by generations of poor nutrition, begins to stretch upwards once more as diets improve. Yet the most profound shifts occur not in the stomachs, but in the hearts and minds of the survivors. The land once teeming with life now echoes with silence. Half of Europe's people have vanished into history. Fields still cry out for plowing crops, for harvesting cloth, for weaving, and buildings for repair. Yet where are the hands to perform these tasks? In this vacuum of labor, surviving peasants and artisans find themselves holding an unprecedented card. Take Thomas Fletcher, the plowman of your village, for example. Before the plague, he toiled 6 days a week, his back bent to the earth in exchange for a meager plot of land. Any hint of complaint or slack in his labor would see him easily replaced by the desperate throng. But now, with the village's workforce halved, the local steward comes to him cap in hand, seeking his labor with a deference previously unimaginable. Thomas finds himself at a crossroads, his heart pounding, as the steward presents him with an offer that seems too good to be true. Imagine the scene, a larger plot of land under his command, his labor service slashed from 6 days to a mere 3, and the exhilarating freedom to seek wage work elsewhere. This isn't just an offer. It's a lifeline thrown to him out of sheer necessity. Without Thomas's masterful touch on the plow, the fields would languish, and the repercussions would ripple through the manor, affecting even the Lord himself. This drama unfolds not just in one corner of Europe, but everywhere. Across the continent, peasants once tethered to the earth like the roots of ancient oaks suddenly find their chains loosening. Landlords desperate to retain their workforce dangle the carrot of freedom from serfdom. Others, in a bid to keep their lands tilled, convert labor dues into straightforward rent, granting peasants the autonomy to cultivate their fields as they wish, provided the rent is met. For the skilled, the transformation is nothing short of revolutionary. Masons, carpenters, blacksmiths, weavers, their crafts are now in such demand that their wages soar to heights previously unimaginable. A carpenter once struggling to keep hunger at bay now constructs a home with glass windows, dons finer garments, and savors meat thrice weekly. What a change! What a life! Yet, this newfound prosperity strikes fear into the hearts of the nobility and the merchant elite. The very fabric of the social order seems to unravel as former serfs assert their rights and common laborers live with the heirs of minor gentry. In response, across Europe, the powers that be strive to clamp down on this burgeoning freedom. They attempt to shackle wages back to their pre-plague levels, to tether workers once more to their old oppressive conditions. In England, the government, in its wisdom or folly, introduces the Ordinance of Labourers in 1349, followed by the Statute of Labourers in 1351. These decrees are draconian, aiming to halt the tide of change. They prohibit the offering of wages above the pre-plague rates, restrict workers from seeking better fortunes elsewhere, and even attempt to control the prices of essentials. Can such laws truly hold back the winds of change? Across the tapestry of Europe, a similar thread of legislation weaves its way through history. France, in the year 1351, alongside the city-state of Florence, enacts stringent wage controls in a desperate bid to stabilize their economies. The Spanish Kingdom of Castile, not to be outdone, attempts to tether its peasantry to the land with its own restrictive labor laws. Yet these well-intentioned decrees largely fall flat. The labor scarcity grips the continent with an iron fist, and the economic pressures mount like an unrelenting storm. Enforcement becomes a Herculean task, particularly in the countryside where local officials themselves, reliant on the goodwill of the scant workforce, often look the other way when laws are bent or broken. Workers, ingenious in their survival, devise myriad ways to sidestep these wage caps. A carpenter, barred from earning beyond a set daily wage, might find himself the recipient of gifts. A loaf of bread here, a new shirt there, or even a humble abode, subtly enriching his life beyond the confines of his official pay. Meanwhile, a farmhand aware of his leverage might work with the pace of a snail or the carelessness of a novice, unless coaxed with terms sweeter than those the law permits. For those tasked with upholding these decrees, the numbers tell a grim tale. Where once a lord commanded 100 laborers, now he is lucky to have half that number. To punish one is to further deplete his workforce and to treat them too harshly. They might simply vanish into the night, knowing well that their skills are in demand elsewhere. This tension, this imbalance, bubbles over into various peasant revolts that sweep across Europe. In 1358, the rural landscapes around Paris ignite, with the Jacquerie Rebellion, peasants rising like wildfire against castles and noble estates. Though their uprising is crushed with ruthless efficiency, it marks a turning point, a new boldness in the hearts of the laboring classes. England, too, feels this simmering discontent for decades until it erupts in 1381 with the Peasants' Revolt. Led by fiery figures like Wat Tyler Jack Straw and the radical priest John Ball, tens of thousands of commoners storm London. Their demands ring out clear an end to serfdom, the abolition of the detested poll tax, and a plea for greater social equality. John Ball's sermon, delivered with the fervor of a prophet, encapsulates the revolutionary spirit of the age. The poignant moment when Adam delved and Eve span, as John Ball's voice echoes through the ages with his piercing question, "Who was then the gentleman?" This rhetorical query shakes the foundations of aristocratic privilege, challenging the very notion of inherent nobility. From the dawn of time, were we not all forged from the same clay? How then did our chains of bondage and servitude come to be, if not by the cruel oppression of the wicked? Though the English uprising, much like the Jacquerie, was quelled through a mix of deceitful promises and ruthless force, it heralded a seismic shift in the collective mind. Peasants once resigned to their divinely ordained servitude now dared to question the very structure of society. Workers who once had no option but to accept the scraps thrown their way now boldly demanded their rightful share of dignity and respect. The aftermath of the plague wasn't confined to the countryside. Urban landscapes underwent their own dramatic metamorphosis. Cities with their cramped quarters bore the brunt of the Black Death's wrath. Imagine Florence, a jewel of medieval Europe, losing up to 75% of its populace. Yet, from such profound loss, opportunities arose like phoenixes from ashes. Suddenly, the once scarce and costly housing became plentiful and within reach. Young apprentices found themselves prematurely anointed as masters. As guilds dwindled, their senior members gone. Women, traditionally barred from many trades, stepped into roles vacated by their deceased male kin. Take, for instance, Margareta, a widow of a weaver in a quaint market town. Prior to the plague, she could only assist her husband in his craft, barred by guild rules from running a weaving business on her own. But when the plague took her husband, leaving her with his tools, his loom, and all the knowledge she had acquired, the Weavers' Guild was faced with a stark choice. Should they uphold the ban against women in their ranks, losing a skilled artisan in the process? Or should they adapt to the new world, where Margareta's expertise was not just a luxury, but a necessity? In this new world, reshaped by the aftermath of the devastating plague, an intriguing dance unfolds. The Guild, once a bastion of tradition, now bends under the weight of necessity. Faced with dwindling ranks and a soaring demand for cloth, they embrace Margareta as a full member, a compromise echoed across Europe, where survival dictates change. For a fleeting moment, women step into economic roles previously unimaginable, their newfound opportunities a beacon of progress amidst the gloom. But how long will this light shine? The Grim Reaper's shadow casts a long pall over the land, yet from the ashes of despair, a new consciousness blooms. Death's inevitability and life's fragility become the muses of art and architecture. The macabre, with its skeletal figures and scenes of the dance of death, emerges not just as an artistic theme, but as a societal mirror. Skeletons indifferent to class lead all to the grave in a haunting reminder of equality in death. Yet what stirs in the hearts of those who witness this dance? Amidst this somber tableau, a vibrant counterpoint arises, a celebration of life, its fleeting beauty, and its pleasures. The survivors, acutely aware of life's brevity, clutch luxury and beauty with a fervor unknown before. Clothing transforms from the drab, practical attire of yesteryears to rich, colorful, and elaborate ensembles, each thread a testament to a life cherished. Yet this newfound expression of self stirs unease among the nobility. They scramble to enforce sumptuary laws, desperate to maintain the visual hierarchy of society. But can laws truly dictate the heart's desire for beauty? And what of the spiritual realm? The church, once the unwavering beacon of medieval life, now finds itself in crisis. Priests and monks, either fleeing their sacred duties or succumbing to the plague, leave their flocks in spiritual darkness. Monasteries, those repositories of knowledge, suffer catastrophic losses, erasing centuries of wisdom in mere moments. The very fabric of religious authority frays, leaving a void where once there was certainty. In this new reality, where does one turn for solace, for truth? More fundamentally, the plague thrusts upon us uncomfortable theological quandaries. If, as many ecclesiastical authorities assert, this disaster serves as divine retribution, why then do the virtuous and the sinful meet the same grim fate? Why do devout monks succumb while seemingly impious laymen endure? If prayer and penance are the supposed antidotes, why do outbreaks ravage monasteries with such ferocity? No comforting answers arise from the well-worn paths of traditional theology. Instead, from the ashes of this devastation, two divergent religious trends emerge. Some survivors, their hearts swelling with gratitude for their survival, embrace an even more fervent piety, viewing their endurance as a divine blessing that calls for a life of devout service. Yet others, disillusioned by the silence and impotence of religious authorities, in the face of such calamity, adopt a more skeptical, questioning stance. This spirit of inquiry, coupled with economic shifts that afford ordinary people more resources and leisure, sows the seeds for an intellectual renaissance. When fewer hands are needed to sustain society, more minds can turn to the pursuits of art, philosophy, science, and literature. Education, once the preserve of the clergy and nobility, begins to seep into the wider fabric of society. Newly affluent merchants and artisans, eager to elevate their social standing, seek education for their children, not merely for its utility in business, but as a symbol of their rising status. In towns and even larger villages, small schools spring up imparting practical knowledge alongside the traditional teachings of religion. The demographic upheaval caused by the plague also acts as a catalyst for technological innovation. With labor becoming both scarce and costly, techniques that conserve human effort gain immense value. Watermills, long utilized for grinding grain, are ingeniously adapted for a myriad of new uses, from powering bellows for blast furnaces to driving hammers in metalworking to fulling cloth. Moreover, the technology of printing, which will eventually revolutionize the dissemination of knowledge throughout Europe, finds early encouragement in the labor shortages following the plague. The painstakingly crafted, handwritten manuscripts, once the labor-intensive work of skilled scribes, now face prohibitive costs, as these workers command higher wages. Herein lies the paradox. A disaster that brought so much suffering inadvertently paves the way for enlightenment as human ingenuity seeks to fill the void left by tragedy. The relentless march of progress. In the mid-15th century, the economic winds howled with a fierce determination, urging the birth of movable type printing as a mechanical alternative to the traditional scribes. Yet beneath this technological push, a profound shift was brewing. Imagine the horror, the utter devastation as the Black Death swept through medieval Europe, claiming lives with a voracious hunger. Half the population vanished in mere years, leaving behind a landscape of loss and confusion. In this chaos, the very fabric of society unraveled. Social ladders toppled, and the once unassailable authorities faltered, unable to shield or explain the calamity. The very notion that the world should remain static, unaltered, began to crumble. How could it not, when the very earth beneath their feet had shifted so dramatically post-plague? A daring thought crept into the hearts of many. What if the world could be different? Could there be new ways to work, share, and govern? This wasn't about grand visions of societal overhaul. It was about survival, about finding new paths when the old ones were blocked by death and decay. Most of these imagined alternatives never took root. Many that did were fleeting, mere whispers in the winds of change. Yet, the psychological shackles that once bound the medieval mind to unyielding tradition began to loosen ever so slightly. This subtle shift in perception paved the way for the seeds of innovation to sprout, not just in thought, but in technology, art, and the very bones of social organization, transforming the medieval into the early modern. For those living through these tumultuous times, like Thomas the Plowman, the focus was not on the grand decline of feudalism, but on securing a better life for his family through negotiation with the steward. Margarita the weaver, meanwhile, didn't see herself as a pioneer of gender equality. She was merely surviving using her craft to keep her household afloat after tragedy struck. Yet it is through these countless, seemingly small decisions made by millions in the wake of extraordinary circumstances that the stone of medieval life was slowly, inexorably reshaped. Not all changes were for the better, of course. The labor shortages that empowered the workers also spelled ruin for many landowners. Estates crumbled, unable to adapt to this new economic reality. The echoes of change reverberated through churches, monasteries, and every corner of society, setting the stage for a new era. Amidst the shadow cast by the relentless grip of the plague, charitable institutions, once pillars of hope and sustenance, now found themselves wrestling with the harsh realities of diminished funds. Their reliance on steady rents and generous donations now faltered, leaving them to navigate the murky waters of financial instability with a heavy heart. In the corners of society where despair and excess intermingled, criminal activity surged. Young men, their pockets suddenly heavier, but their lives less supervised, indulged in the fleeting joys of alcohol, only to find themselves ensnared in the web of trouble. Meanwhile, abandoned rural homesteads, once bustling with life, now stood as silent sentinels offering refuge to outlaws and miscreants. Urban areas, too, were not spared the turmoil. City officials, their ranks thinned by disease, gazed out over their domains with a growing sense of unease. How could they maintain order when their watch forces were so depleted? The question echoed through the cobblestone streets, a haunting reminder of their vulnerability. For decades, following the initial onslaught of the plague, smaller epidemics continued to ravage European communities, thwarting any hope of demographic recovery. These recurring outbreaks not only prevented population growth, but also solidified the economic and social upheavals initially triggered by the first wave of the pestilence. It was not until the late 15th century that Europe's population began to swell once more. And even then, it took until the 17th century for many regions to reclaim their pre-plague numbers. This prolonged period of demographic stagnation allowed the changes set in motion by the Black Death to take root, transforming what might have been fleeting disruptions into enduring norms. In the midst of this societal transformation, the medieval peasantry experienced gradual improvements. Your brother, having miraculously survived his own dance with death, seized the opportunity to claim a neighboring farm left desolate by the absence of its former owners. What would have been an unattainable dream before the plague, the accumulation of significant land, now became a tangible reality in the depopulated countryside. Your father, his carpentry skills now more valuable than ever, secured a contract to aid in the reconstruction of the local church, a structure that had suffered from years of neglect during the plague years. The compensation he received not only allowed him to expand your family's humble cottage, but also to replace the cold earthen floor with warm wooden planks. These small luxuries, once unimaginable, now stood as testaments to the profound shifts in the fabric of daily life. In the quiet of an autumn evening, with the warmth of the hearth casting a soft glow on your family gathered around your mother, shares with you and your sister the invaluable gift of literacy, a skill she herself acquired during her service in a merchant's household, before the winds of change altered the world. In times past, before the shadow of the plague darkened the land, such knowledge would have been merely an embellishment for peasant children offering little of practical use. Yet, in the evolving landscape of the late 14th century, the ability to read and write has become a key that unlocks doors once barred to those born into modest circumstances. As the flames flicker, casting dancing shadows on the walls, your father, his voice thoughtful, breaks the silence with words that would have been unimaginable to the generations before him. Perhaps you could be a clerk? He muses, his gaze fixed on the fire. The Abbey needs someone with your skills to manage their records. The pay would be good, and the work would not break your back. Your brother's laughter, warm and not unkind, fills the room. A clerk from our family. What would grandfather say to that? Indeed, the notion of a peasant's child stepping into such a role would have seemed as outlandish as the stars realigning themselves. But as you drift into slumber that night, the idea doesn't fade into the realm of fantasy. Instead, it plants itself firmly in your mind as a tangible possibility. This perhaps is the true legacy of the Black Death. Not merely the immediate shifts in wages, working conditions, and societal structures, but the broadening of horizons, the expansion of what ordinary people can envision for themselves and their offspring. As dawn breaks, signaling the end of this chapter in our historical narrative, we leave you at the threshold of this newfound opportunity. Your world, once shattered by unfathomable loss, has been painstakingly pieced back together into a mosaic different from before. The medieval certainties that once dictated the course of life have been questioned, challenged, and in some instances, completely overturned. What lies ahead in this altered world you cannot yet know, But the seeds of change sown in the fertile ground of your imagination promise a future ripe with potential. As the sun sets on our exploration through the harrowing corridors of history, we find ourselves at a crossroads, a moment where the very fabric of Western civilization begins to unravel and reweave itself. The adaptations, the sparks of innovation, and the profound reconsiderations birthed by the plague are the unseen threads that weave through the Renaissance, the Reformation, and beyond, into the very essence of the modern world. But, dear companions, this tapestry of transformation is a tale for our final evening together, where we will delve into how the long shadow cast by the Black Death stretches across centuries, influencing art, science, medicine, and society in ways that continue to mold our present. As we approach the culmination of our journey through the lives of those who survived the plague, let us expand our horizon, witnessing how the ripples of the Black Death continue to spread, influencing our world in ways both subtle and monumental. The echoes of this medieval calamity still reverberate within us through our societies and in our evolving understanding of disease. Let us start with one of the most astonishing legacies, the biological inheritance passed down by the descendants of those who lived through the plague. Recall the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation we spoke of. That genetic anomaly which shielded some from the plague's deadly embrace. This minute alteration in DNA did not vanish with the plague's retreat. Instead, it was bequeathed through generations, becoming enriched in the European gene pool. Those who carried it were more likely to survive, to love, to laugh, and to have children. Fast forward 6 centuries to the late 20th century, when a new specter loomed: HIV/AIDS, claiming millions in its relentless path. Scientists, in their desperate quest to understand this modern plague, stumbled upon a revelation. Some individuals seemed naturally resistant to HIV infection, even after repeated exposure. The reason many of these fortunate souls carried the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation, the same genetic variation that had once saved their ancestors from the Black Death. How wondrous, how utterly profound, that the same biological armor that protected against one scourge could stand guard against another centuries later. The connection crystallizes as we understand the common thread in the operation of both diseases, their reliance on the CCR5 protein as a gateway to our cells. Oh, the marvels of human genetics! Picture this: a microscopic gateway, a portal into the very cells that compose our being. This gateway, known as the CCR5 receptor, stands guard its purpose to allow entry to various agents that seek to interact with our cellular world. But here comes a twist in the tale of mutation, the Delta 32, which fortifies this gateway, transforming it into an impregnable fortress against invaders like HIV. Imagine a genetic adaptation born from the grim reaper of the 14th century, the Black Death, now unexpectedly shielding us from a modern-day scourge. This discovery, a beacon of hope, led to the crafting of HIV drugs that cleverly mimic this genetic marvel, blocking the very same receptor that the Delta 32 mutation naturally secures. Isn't it astonishing? Medieval survivors, their DNA, whispering secrets across centuries, have inadvertently become our guardians in the fight against HIV. Their genetic legacy, a beacon in the darkness of disease, offers us a crucial clue in battling an affliction they could scarcely conceive. Yet the ripple effects of the Black Death extend far beyond this singular mutation. This cataclysmic event was not just a historical footnote, but a profound force of natural selection. The survivors, those whose bodies could resist the relentless siege of Yersinia pestis, their descendants now walk among us. Could it be that their robust immune systems, once their salvation, now predispose them to the autoimmune diseases that plague modern Europeans, conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis, where the immune system turns traitor, attacking its own tissues? Oh, the irony and the depth of these biological connections. Pandemics do not merely kill, they sculpt the genetic landscape of those left behind, their impact lingering like a shadow across generations. The Black Death, with its grim harvest, not only decimated populations but also reshaped the very fabric of our genetic code. And as we ponder these connections, we must also consider the profound social and economic upheavals it wrought. The immediate aftermath saw labor shortages, a surge in wages, and a new era of social mobility transformations that, while fading over time, left indelible marks on the tapestry of European history. Imagine the profound shifts that the Black Death set in motion, like a tempest sweeping across the land, leaving no stone unturned. In Western Europe, the age-old institution of serfdom, which had shackled peasants to the soil for generations, was irrevocably altered. The relentless scythe of the plague cut through the population, leaving landlords grasping at the ghosts of their former authority. Despite their desperate attempts to reinstate the old chains of restriction, the demographic landscape had changed. Land lay abundant, but workers oh so scarce. This imbalance tipped the scales in favor of the laboring class, slowly but surely chipping away at the bedrock of feudal obligations. By the twilight of the Middle Ages, serfdom had faded into the mists of history across England, France, and the Low Countries, replaced by a new dawn of rental agreements. Peasants still tilled the earth, but now as tenants with a newfound freedom, their bonds no longer tied to the hereditary yoke of servitude and labor. Contrast this with Eastern Europe, where the nobility, like ancient trees with roots deep in tradition, managed not only to reimpose, but to fortify serfdom. Here, the second serfdom took root, its tendrils extending well into the 19th century. This stark divergence between the paths of Western and Eastern Europe, one towards liberation and the other towards tighter control, would weave a complex tapestry of regional development. The Black Death was not just a harbinger of death, but a catalyst for profound change in religious life too. The Catholic Church, once the unchallenged beacon of medieval thought and spirit, now faced a storm of doubt. Why did prayers go unanswered? Why did the devout perish alongside the sinful? Such questions, like tiny cracks in a vast, imposing edifice, began to undermine the foundation of blind faith. These fissures, barely visible at first, would grow into chasms in the centuries that followed. The Protestant Reformation, with its bold challenge to Catholic authority and its call for personal engagement with Scripture, found fertile ground in a population already tilled by doubt. Though the Reformation had many seeds, one cannot ignore the echoes of the plague's disillusionment that resonated within it. Imagine the collective sigh of humanity, the fervent desire to break free from the chains of centuries-old traditions. It was a time when the world, in its darkest hour, found a new voice through art and literature, forever altered by the harrowing experience of the Black Death. Unwind, chapter 28 to 42. Once medieval art was a canvas dominated by the divine, with every brushstroke telling tales of biblical scenes, the lives of saints and celestial beings. But post-plague, the art world witnessed a metamorphosis. New themes emerged, haunting and profound. The dance of death became a poignant motif where skeletons, indifferent to status, led souls from every walk of life into the grave. Still life paintings, too, began to whisper of mortality, urging viewers to ponder their own fleeting existence. 1-2908. This marked a pivotal shift towards humanism, where the human experience, emotions, and achievements took center stage, blooming beautifully alongside the rediscovered wisdom of Greek and Roman antiquity. Oh, how this focus on humanity reshaped the very essence of European identity and perception of the world. But the plague's influence didn't stop at art. It permeated the very language we speak. Our vocabulary today still echoes with the cries of the past. Take quarantine, a term birthed from the Italian quarantina giorni, meaning 40 days the period ships had to remain isolated in Venetian harbors to curb plague spread. What's for 29? Considered deadline, originally a line beyond which prison guards could shoot without warning, akin to the boundaries set around plague-stricken zones. Even our childhood games might carry the shadow of this dark history. Ring Around the Rosie, with its seemingly innocent chant, might just be a chilling reminder of plague symptoms, the rosy rash the posies carried, to mask the stench of death and the ashes as we all fall down. 1324. Though scholars debate this interpretation, it whispers of how deeply the plague's imagery has seeped into our cultural fabric. The Black Death also redefined our relationship with disease. Before its scourge, illness was often viewed through a lens of divine retribution or imbalance in the humors. But in the wake of such widespread suffering, humanity began to question, to seek understanding beyond the divine. Chapter 30,000, Chapter 50. In a world where the balance of bodily humors held sway and the concept of contagion was but a distant thought, the plague's relentless march along trade routes and through intimate human contact could not be denied. This grim spread a cruel dance from person to person, forced communities to face the undeniable truth: diseases could be contagious. Despite their lack of understanding of germ theory, which would not enlighten the world until the 19th century, these communities forged practical responses. Ships were detained in quarantine, infected homes became islands of isolation, and the belongings of the afflicted were often consumed by purifying flames. Cities, in their desperate struggle, established public health boards endowed with sweeping powers during outbreaks. These guardians of health laid down the foundational stones of epidemic management principles that would resonate through the corridors of time. Oh, the bitter lessons learned through experience rather than scientific insight. These pragmatic strategies born from the crucible of suffering undoubtedly saved countless souls in the plagues that followed. By the time the last significant European plague epidemic besieged Marseille in 1720, authorities had mastered the art of containment. They implemented cordons sanitaires, enforced stringent quarantines, and maintained vigilant surveillance, effectively confining the outbreak to Marseille and its environs. Alas, these measures arrived too late for the millions who had already fallen. Yet the wisdom gleaned from the Black Death's shadow helped temper the ferocity of later outbreaks and informed responses to other scourges. When cholera ravaged Europe in the 19th century, Public health officials, drawing from the ancient well of plague management, began to contain its spread, albeit imperfectly at first. As scientific understanding blossomed, so too did the effectiveness of these measures. The legacy of the plague stretches into the modern era of pandemics. Today's tactics, quarantines, travel bans, contact tracing, and isolation of the infected have their roots in the centuries-old responses to the Black Death. Even the eternal conflict between safeguarding health and sustaining the economy echoes the medieval debates over whether to seal city gates and shutter markets during plague times. How history whispers to us through the ages, urging us to learn from the past. The harrowing experience of the Black Death indelibly altered humanity's perception of disaster itself. In the shadow-draped medieval Europe, where calamity seemed an eternal companion, people were accustomed to the specters of war, famine, and lesser pestilences. Yet the plague swept through with a ferocity and velocity that eclipsed all known calamities, leaving an indelible mark on the collective psyche. 33, chapter 40. This dance with near-apocalyptic mortality necessitated a profound psychological recalibration. Surviving communities realized they could weather unimaginable loss and still persist. Individuals unearthed within themselves a resilience they scarcely knew they harbored. Societies, in turn, wove this resilience into their very fabric, creating institutional memories and adaptive strategies for future crises. 3408. This resilience, this indefatigable spirit in the face of catastrophe, is perhaps humanity's most cherished treasure. Time and again, through history's darkest chapters, communities have faced what appeared to be insurmountable devastation. Yet life, with its relentless tenacity, persists. People grieve for those lost, reconstruct their lives from the ashes, adapt their ways, and stride forward, cradling the memories of what once was, while forging something new from the remnants. Chapter 35. This cycle of devastation and regeneration is a recurring motif in human history. From the catastrophic eruption that entombed Pompeii to the earth-shattering Lisbon earthquake of 1755, from the grim reaper of the 1918 influenza to the more recent tremors of nature and outbreaks of disease, the Black Death stands as perhaps the most extreme testament to our capacity to endure, adapt, and ultimately to carry on. 135:05. Let us not diminish the agony such events inflict. The plague unleashed sorrow beyond comprehension, sundering families and communities, extinguishing millions of lives, each teeming with unique experiences and potential. No societal evolution or biological adaptation can ever justify such a toll. Yet, by understanding how our forebears navigated these tempests, we gain insight into our own resilience, our ability to confront the looming shadows of climate change, emerging diseases, and technological upheavals. 1:35. Our world, fraught with existential threats, challenges us to remember and harness this resilience. As we journey through the annals of history, we are reminded that past generations grappled with crises of their own challenges that seemed insurmountable, yet were met with resilience and adaptability. For those like Thomas the Plowman, who in the wake of labor scarcity fought for better wages and conditions, the grand tapestry of feudal decline was merely a distant echo. His immediate struggle was for survival for a better life. And Elizabeth Hancock, as she laid her loved ones to rest on that hillside above could scarcely conceive that her bloodline might one day shield future generations from a 20th century scourge. Yet it is through the collective, through the myriad personal stories of survival and adaptation, that the fabric of society was rewoven. History, in its silent, majestic dance, unfolds not only through the decrees of great leaders or pivotal moments, but through the cumulative impact of countless ordinary souls, each responding to the extraordinary with what strength they could muster. What wisdom might we glean from these tales of survival? Perhaps the most poignant lesson is the indomitable spirit of human resilience. The Black Death, with its unfathomable toll, stripped away nearly half of many populations, decimated entire families, and erased centuries of knowledge and culture in its wake. And yet, from the ashes of such devastation, survivors rose their spirits unbroken. They rebuilt, they remade families and communities, crafting new beginnings from the remnants of the old. And let us ponder this. Does not catastrophe, for all its terror, sometimes forge pathways to new possibilities? The rigid, seemingly eternal social structures of medieval Europe, so fixed in their roles, were shaken by the shifting demographic sands. Suddenly, those bound by tradition found themselves at the threshold of new opportunities, new identities. What might we learn from such resilience, from such unexpected openings in the face of disaster? History reveals that transformation often springs from the depths of crisis. The narrative of the plague serves as a poignant reminder of our biological interconnectedness, not only with each other, but also with the myriad microscopic organisms that inhabit our shared planet. The bacterium Yersinia pestis, responsible for the Black Death, has sculpted human genetics, reshaped social structures, altered economic systems, and influenced cultural expressions in ways that still reverberate through time. 1 Peter to 38. 30. Other microbes, too, have woven themselves into the fabric of history, playing roles both sinister and supportive in the unfolding human saga. We live in an eternal dance with an invisible biological world, a world that can both nourish and endanger us. Yet perhaps the most profound lesson the plague narrative imparts is the contemplation of our own mortality and vulnerability. Medieval souls lived with death as a constant, intimate companion, a reality that most in the modern West can scarcely fathom. 38 found 59. The plague sharpened this focus on mortality, sparking a renaissance in art, literature, and philosophy that pondered the fleeting nature of life. This contemplation, rather than being a descent into morbidity, often led to a profound appreciation of life. Those who survived the plague often embraced life anew, understanding with stark clarity how swiftly and unexpectedly it could be snuffed out. 39 20. There is wisdom in this perspective, a clear-eyed recognition of life's preciousness because it is finite and uncertain. As our tale nears its close, let us return once more to that medieval village we first encountered, now a generation removed from the plague's shadow. 45. The streets once again echo with the laughter of children and young families, have settled into homes that stood desolate for years. The survivors now, the village elders, carry with them not just the scars of what they endured, but also the seeds of change they helped to sow in the aftermath. They could not foresee how their experiences would ripple through the ages, affecting everything from genetic legacies to societal norms, from artistic endeavors to public health strategies. 16. They simply lived, striving to make the most of the life they were granted in a world irrevocably altered by a calamity that, while devastating, ultimately taught them to cherish life's every fleeting moment. In the tapestry of human history, woven through countless trials and tribulations, lies the enduring spirit of our kind. How often do we find ourselves thrust into circumstances not of our choosing yet, with a resilience that speaks to the very core of our being? We adapt, we persevere. It's this same spirit that has propelled humanity through millennia of challenges, a spirit so profound that it comforts us as we drift into dreams. Imagine, if you will, the survivors of the Black Death, their lives shadowed by a calamity so vast. They could not have fathomed the marvels of our time, our medical technologies, our instant global dialogues, or our deep scientific understanding of the very scourge that once ravaged their world. And yet, here we stand in our era, equally unable to fully grasp the world our descendants will inherit. But, dear viewer, take heart. Just as those medieval souls before us, we too move forward. We carry the scars of past disasters, yes, but also the wisdom gleaned from overcoming them. Each of us, in our own way, contributes to this ever-unfolding saga of human resilience and progress. As you close your eyes tonight, remember, you are a vital link in this chain of human experience bound to the past and the future. You are not alone in your struggles, for each generation has faced its own, each finding unique ways to endure, to adapt, and to push forward. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If our story has touched your heart or stirred your thoughts, we implore you, leave a comment, share your reflections, like our video, and subscribe to our channel. Together, let's keep the conversation alive, for it is in sharing our stories that we find strength, understanding, and hope.